This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard. The whole thing is available on all major podcast providers. Donald Trump certainly likes an October surprise.
We've just learned through explosive documents published by a very fine newspaper, the New York Post, that Joe Biden has been blatantly lying about his involvement in his son's corrupt business dealings.
The New York Post had barely published its story about allegations into Hunter Biden's personal and business life when the president brought them up at a rally in Iowa. Mr. Trump's enthusiasm seemed short-lived, though. It wasn't just the Democrats' swift denial of the claims about Joe Biden's son. The social media giants Twitter and Facebook both censored the story and prevented sharing while it was being fact-checked. You couldn't even DM the link on Twitter at one point. Mr. Trump's threatening to take action against the companies. So, is this October surprise going to affect the election? Do any of them? Joining me now is Professor Christopher Phelps from Nottingham University's Department of American Studies. Christopher, there is a long tradition of this sort of thing happening in US politics, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Wasn't always known as the October surprise. So it's a classic October surprise would be an intervention, as you say, that is by design, tactically, information that's withheld by one campaign and dumped at a strategic moment to alter the dynamics of the race and turn it in their favor. But it's taken a lot of different forms. There have been surprises that neither campaign has anticipated. There have been attempts to suppress developments that could lead to an October surprise. So it can take place in a variety of different ways. And I suppose October surprise might be a name by which we impose on the chaos of history those events that happen to crop up right before elections and grab people's attention.
I know I often see US spin doctors kind of say there's an October surprise coming with a little sly smile behind them, like it's going to change everything. Do they actually work, though? Has there ever been an October surprise that has changed the result of an election?
So in our current situation, you could imagine that a vaccine, for example, might be game-changing. If Pfizer or AstraZeneca came out and said, we have a successful test, the vaccine will be available by January, COVID is solved, then people might say, okay, let's take the whole COVID issue off the table and let's remember what the economy was like before that hit. And maybe now Trump looks a lot better to some people, to some voters. But apart from something massive like that, it's hard to imagine this race being changed. Well, the history of this starts all the way back in the early republic when there was a race between Adams and Jefferson. Adams was the incumbent president. And there was an October surprise, but I don't think either of the two candidates planned it. It was an intervention by Alexander Hamilton, who wrote a 50-page smear letter about Adams's character. Now, ironically, Hamilton was part of the same Federalist Party that John Adams was part of, but it was factionalism within the Federalist Party that then may have played a role in allowing Jefferson to win. But I think it's become less and less possible for an October surprise to work, simply because of the structure of modern elections. People are already voting in the United States. They're already lining up to vote. 17 million people have estimated to have voted already in early voting in various states that allow that. There are many more people who've mailed in their mail-in ballots. So aside from the fact that if you didn't have an opinion on Donald Trump by now and whether or not he should remain president of the United States, and you're one of those people who remains malleable, very many people have already made a decision that they can't alter even based on new information. They were happy to go ahead and not wait 3 more weeks for more information. They had their minds made up.
Actually, those numbers for the people who have done early voting are interesting, because that's part of what's making this election so unique. And I wonder if the reaction on social media to these Hunter Biden allegations is also perhaps maybe disappointed the Republicans, who are maybe hoping this would be a big surprise, because of course it got censored by Facebook and Twitter, which they've never done before.
Yeah, the emails are supposedly off of Hunter Biden's notebook computer, but the man who had these computers in his computer shop in Delaware can't vouch for certain that it was Hunter Biden who dropped them off. Nobody has seen the metadata, which is the technical term for where the emails came from to be able to trace whether they're real or whether they're forgeries. We do have on record by all US intelligence agencies the fact that in the 2016 election, the Russian intelligence services were intervening consciously with disinformation. And so is this a real thing or is it false? Let's just assume for a minute that it's real. Let's assume Hunter Biden sent these emails and that the whole computer is really from Hunter Biden and they have photographs of him. Does it matter? It's Hunter Biden. It's the kind of rogue son. I think of Hunter Biden as a bit like Billy Carter, if anybody remembers Billy Carter. He had his Billy Beer. He tried to capitalize on the name of his brother, and he had this weird relationship with the Libyan government. Didn't matter a bit. And Biden has been pretty effective in saying, look, my son struggled with drug addiction. I'm proud of him for trying to overcome that. And is any of this going to stick and make somebody not vote for Joe Biden? Hunter Biden's name is not on the ballot. So I think they need a better October surprise. I think they need something like, well, I think Amy Coney Barrett is playing their wave with their base because it reminds them that having Trump in the White House will provide conservative judges, and that's an October event. So something's got to come down the pike that's got to be more than Hunter Biden's emails, I think, even if these are real.
Could it get nastier then?
It's hard to imagine because Joe Biden is such an innocuous figure in a personal sense. One might be able to argue about his policy, but he's been in politics for 40 years. There's not likely to be much of a surprise on Biden himself. And so it's conceivable, they could come out with something on Harris or something like that we don't know about. She seems a little less tested by time, but Trump is certainly not averse to personalizing politics.
I guess the response to all of this kind of skepticism over whether it will have an effect would be that classic line that came out from 2016, but her emails. People do get upset by these things.
They can get upset about them. Of course, sometimes they just fizzle. If we remember George W. Bush in the race in the year 2000 against Al Gore, shortly before the election, a report came out about his drunk driving episode in 1976. And immediately, George W. Bush said, yeah, that was me. And he said, when I was young and irresponsible, I was young and irresponsible, which was a pretty good retort. And it put it in the past, it contextualized it, and he moved on, and he won the election. Of course, it was you could argue whether he won the election. It got thrown into the Supreme Court, and it was all the dimpled chads and all that. But he prevailed in the end. It didn't affect his ability to win. And so sometimes things that are meant to damage don't